but no one asked me what my diet was like.
That's right.
And no one gave me a choice in, okay, this is how we could proceed, sort of thing. Like we could put you on a fasting keto style diet and maybe some mild form of treatment. It was just, okay, this is our chop, this is what we're doing, and go. It's kind of like there was no time to. It's kind of like I kind of I think it's like when you go in to buy a used car, the first thing they want you to do is to sign the papers to buy it. They don't want you to test drive it.
That's right.
Yeah, just come in, sign the papers, and give me the money.
Welcome to the Protecting Your Nest podcast. Today is part 2 of an episode I did with David C. Kemp, um, also known as DC, of the DC Learning to Live YouTube channel. I'll make sure to have a link to that episode, to his channel in the podcast notes. DC is a survivor of many traumatic experiences, including a tsunami, which was preceded by an earthquake, being homeless, and he's had 2 battles with stage 4 cancer. And in episode number 1, we talked about all of those experiences, and it was such a compelling episode. I thought it'd be nice to just divide it up into 2 separate podcasts. And so the first episode was a little tough to hear because it was a lot of struggle involved, right? And that's why I wanted to have a part 2 where DC can share the things he had to do to improve his overall health. So again, DC, thanks again for giving me a little bit more of your time as we share your incredible story of healing, a story I think that will inspire many as they are trying to achieve metabolic health and achieve their emotional and physical wellness. So so we're kind of transitioning from this story you told in episode 1, and I want to now dive into the role that diet played in your recovery. For many of my followers, they've tried to use this approach for reversal of diabetes, normalizing their blood pressure, reducing their risk for things like cancer, which is your story, and many other health conditions, even reducing the risk for dementia and heart disease and stroke. And it's just nice to know that there's another way. And a lot of times when people are trying to heal, the conventional messages, rather in the United States where I'm at, or in Australia and Japan where you've lived, it's just there's not a lot of hope, and a lot of times we only have one way to do it: chemo, radiation, and but there's other ways to do it. So let's talk a little bit about this dietary thing. Like, first of all, when did you realize that diet was important? And certainly, I'm curious how you discovered diets that reduce carbs as a way to heal.
Um, yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, that really sort of took me a long time. After my treatments, it was the expert advice was that there's nothing I could do about my disease. It was always coming back no matter what. And in 2 years I've been stage 4 twice. It had even while going through treatment, it had come back, and that really sunk into me that this is something that I can't get rid of. And so like when you have follicular lymphoma, like every blood test is like in the back of your head: is it back? Is it this time? Is it going to be back again? You know, um, because I felt fine the first time, and I felt fine the second time.
Mm-hmm.
So I can't tell, just because I feel fine. My wife doesn't believe me if I say I feel fine. I feel fine. She doesn't believe me anymore. you know, you know. And so it was, for a good part of that time, my recovery was, it didn't matter what I ate, didn't matter what I did. it was always going to come back. So
Mhm.
why bother caring? Why worry about it? But one thing, looking back, what I did some years later, what I did notice though is after the transplant, I was so my body was so dried out. It was so
Mhm.
cooked.
Mm.
I mean, literally inside out, I was microwaved
Yeah,
basically.
literally, literally.
Um, my brain was much like I had people come and visit and they would spend some time talking, and I have no recollection of ever seeing them. My memory was shot. I couldn't focus. I couldn't think. I couldn't concentrate on anything. I couldn't even concentrate on watching a movie. I was just out of it. Um, I had severe problems, severe IBS problems. I had severe reflux and all sorts of problems going on because of the side effects. And I still couldn't move. I couldn't walk. I could barely, I couldn't, at first, I couldn't even hold a mug to drink water. Uh, Um, I couldn't speak properly. I couldn't breathe properly. Um, my muscles were so tight. I was very shallow breathing the whole time. Um, but looking back, um, I didn't. I've always eaten clean, like because I've always been into sports, and I've always eaten what I considered to be a clean diet. But it was always, like the typical food pyramid. It was, lean meats, lean, green, and marine. That was it, you know. So lean meats, low fat, and looking back now, that I think was very much the underlying issue was a low fat diet.
Right.
Um, and at the time, I was so bound up and tight. Yeah, I knew my body it needed protein, but I really wasn't thinking about fats. And at the time, obviously, I didn't care either. So I just was craving meat for the first time in my life, actually. And I mean, before that, if I ever bought a steak, I would always cut the fat off it.
Right.
Yeah. Cut it, just because I was fat phobic. Had to have a low fat diet to stay lean.
That's right.
And yeah, at that stage, it was like, well, I don't care if I have a heart attack. Like, bring it on. I'd rather a heart attack than do this again. Um, it just didn't worry me at all. Like, and people would say, at the time, I was eating a lot of meat, but I would eat anything really that I felt like eating because I just I would say even to people who would say something about, "Are you sure you want to eat that sort of thing?" I'd say, "What's it going to do? Give me more cancer?" You know, what's it? What? Why would I let that bother me? You know,
That's right.
um, it's not like I could have any more of it. But so I just pretty much just ate whatever I felt like eating, and at the time, the majority of that was meat because I was craving it, and like I would even get my wife to cook like half a kilo of meat, about a pound of meat in the middle of the night because I was hungry,
That's
and
right.
my body just soaked it up like a sponge. And I didn't really think about it too much. I mean, at the time, I couldn't think very well anyway. I couldn't. I just knew I was hungry and I just wanted meat. So Um, but this went on for a couple of years. I, I'm just going to say, during this period, through the transplant, my wife she would try to find foods for me to eat, like Jello and things like that. Through the transplant, she would catch a bus into the hospital. She'd sit with me there all day long. Then she'd go home, go shopping, and then in the morning try and prepare some food for me. And then for like the first year after being out of the hospital, she couldn't sleep in the same bed because so much radiation was coming out of my body. So she slept on the floor in our little studio, and she changed my sheets and clothes every single day while this is going on. Yeah, like she's incredible. She's really, really strong. And she did everything. She did the washing, the cooking, the cleaning. She went shopping. She did everything for me. I couldn't move. I couldn't go shopping. I couldn't do anything like that. I never left the building. I never left the bed. I was stuck in bed all day. You know. Um, so yeah, and this gets really difficult as well. When you're sort of out of it and you're sick, you don't mind so much being stuck in bed. But when you start to heal and you start to get a bit more energy, and you still can't move, being stuck in bed, it gets very frustrating and very depressing. Um, and I was going through a lot of emotions at this time as well because according to the experts, it's only going to get worse from here. I'm like, how much worse could it get? Seriously, I was like, literally, I had stopped breathing. I was pretty much dead during this transplant. And they're telling me that when it comes back, and it will come back, it's only going to get worse. I'm like, why would you keep going when the experts are telling you this? You just feel like, well, why would you want more of it? Why bother? So it gets, like, emotionally, you get very depressed. Waking up just the next day was depressing, you know. Um, and it's kind of hard to get yourself out of a slump like that. Every, like I said before, every blood test, it's in the back of your mind that it might be back. And after the transplant, every blood test was every week. So we never planned anything more than further than the next blood test. And we did that for years, many years actually, for about 8 years. We never planned more than further than the blood test. Um, it was about the 2.5 year mark I started walking, and we're walking without a walker, so I could walk by myself, and I could almost keep up with my wife. And there was one moment, about 3 years after the transplant, and I ran across the road. Like, it's about 20
Mm.
meters, and I was so excited. I was so excited. I got to the other side of the road, and did you see that? Did you see? I ran. I
That's
ran.
great.
You know,
That's great.
we literally celebrated there on the side of the road. We celebrated the fact that I actually moved a little bit faster than I did
Mhm.
before. You know,
Mhm.
um,
Was it mainly time that got you to that point, or you had already really dived into the dietary changes by then?
no, it was. I mean, I think it's a bit of both. There was time, but um, the fact that through that period, I had started eating a lot more fat in my diet, and it's something that I hadn't noticed because I really wasn't mentally. I wasn't. Um, I didn't have the clarity to really think about it. All I knew is that I just needed that food. I just needed that meat, and that's so I just had those cravings for it. And I did eat a lot of other things, but we never really ate a lot of junk food. Like, my wife would make cakes and cookies, but they were homemade, most of the time. Um, I mean, of course, we're human, so we did have um, other stuff like ice cream was,
Mhm.
it's kind of my Achilles heel when it
Mm,
comes to processed foods.
that's right.
But um, when I got to about the 3.5 year mark, my blood test then went out to every 6 months, and I started noticing then, um, things were looking up, and
Mhm.
it's I'm now 3.5 years, and I'm feeling pretty good. I was pretty fat, because throughout that period I was still on a lot of medications,
Sure.
um, and I wasn't doing anything. I was largely bedridden for most of that time. So whatever I ate, I didn't really use. So I put on a fair bit of weight. So I went up to about 250 pounds, uh, and um, I started. But I did the thing is I started moving again, and I think it was like about that period I started thinking, well, I'll start cutting the carbs, because it was always the same. When I was younger, I'd cut carbs to get leaner, you know. So I started cutting down on carbs, and I just eat more meat, and things just progressively got better. Um, I still had trouble, even though I could walk and I was moving around. Mobility was still a little bit of a problem. I was weak. I was carrying more weight, and of course, I still had a lot of medications. Um, and it was about it took I think it was about 4.5 to 5 years before my wife. I got to the point where I felt comfortable going to public places, because throughout that time my immune system was still very low,
Mhm. Sure.
and so like going around large groups of people, I was worried about catching colds and flus, because a cold and flu would still last me months at a time. A cold would make me so sick that it would sometimes put me back in hospital. Um, and so that was always a concern. And as so I didn't go. I think the most I ventured out was to go food shopping with my wife. So that was about it.
Was she ever, concerned about this meat heavy I know you were craving it, but her experience with food, did that create concerns that this meat heavy thing would actually cause more harm than help?
No,
She was
no,
okay.
she was never worried about that. Like in Japan, they eat a lot of meat,
Mhm.
and very fatty meat. They love fatty meat. They absolutely love it. And it doesn't matter whether it's fish, pork, beef, anything else. They don't like lamb so much, on average, but everything else, very fatty meat, they love it. And it wasn't until she met me that she started to think about lean meats, because I told her, fatty meat makes you fat.
That's right.
Stupid garbage like that. Um,
What's funny about your statement about Japan, we both know that Japan and Hong Kong tend to fight for the longest longevity status every
yeah,
year, and
yeah.
uh, and of course Hong Kong eats the most meat per capita. But
Mm.
it's also nice to know that Japan, including Okinawa, Japan, which is a blue zone, they eat meat
Yeah,
and they
that blue
live
zone
long.
BS.
I
Yeah,
know it's like crazy.
it's absolute BS. And
Yeah,
like I mean, they cherry picked a period where meat was scarce because of the poverty after the Second War and
right,
during the
right.
Second War. But Japan, they love meat, especially Okinawa. They love pork and seafood, especially, and just any meat they can find. Honestly, like Japanese will eat anything that's moved at one time and then in their life, and if it didn't move, they'd push it to check. You know.
Okay. I believe that
Honestly.
100%. And
Oh
I'll
man.
say this real quick, man, because you talked about not being able to move, walk, uh, and not being able to hold a mug, and you also mentioned shallow breathing. All of these things require muscle,
Yeah.
and in order to build muscle, anybody that follows this channel knows that you need those essential amino acids. They're the building blocks of life, and they
Exactly.
so amino acids from protein help you build and repair the muscles, the bones, the cartilage, even the skin. It helps to regulate our genes and how we express them, which is really kind of cool. Protein is also important for digestion because there are enzymes that are, they need to work with protein to help aid in digestion. And there's so many functions. And then you mentioned the importance of fat, and fat is like I did an entire presentation on the mitochondria at the Symposium for Metabolic Health in San Diego a couple of years ago, and I talked about of the energy sources, fat wins every time in terms of energy, and that's why we have bellies with fat, because
Yeah.
that source of energy is so important. How our cells are supported need fat, and just fat's just really important. I mean, something as simple as cholesterol and fats needed to make testosterone. So for us guys, and even women need testosterone. So I just think understanding biochemistry makes it easier to understand why your body was craving
Yeah.
protein and fat. And I'm so happy that you were able to figure that out. So
Yeah.
you went keto. You kind of did kind of not even thinking about it. It sounds like you kind of did low carb, keto, and ultimately more carnivore. So what made you transition uh, more and more towards a carnivore diet? Did you feel better, or what other reasons did you have?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like once you, for me, was working out. Once you realize that your lymphatic system thrives on absorbing fat, um, that was how I sort of focused on repairing my immune system.
Mm-hmm.
Because, I mean, like you said, like testosterone is produced from cholesterol, but so is D3 as a hormone, and that's key to our immune system. And when you realize you got like five major organs that are set up basically just to absorb fat, and you need it in for your lymphatic system, for the lymph fluid, for your white cells, and everything like that. Um, then I realized, well, okay, so fat is the way I'm going to repair my lymphatic system and and strengthen my immune system, because throughout these years I was feeling pretty good, but I still had that low fat mentality too. When I
Mm-hmm.
at about the 5 year mark, actually it was more 5.5 year mark, my wife said to me I was starting to move around, and she said to me, "What if you started coming back to the gym with me?"
Mm.
Actually, it all started because, like you said, with the shallow breathing. When I was still stuck in bed, the first thing I started doing was deep breathing exercises to try and
Mm.
move
Yeah,
everything
get it.
around,
Yeah.
try and get that lymph fluid moving, and just to try and expand my lungs a bit because I couldn't breathe very well. So that's when I first found Wim Hof, and I started doing that from the bed. I couldn't do it very well to start with, so I broke it down into half of what their basic level was, and just did it the way I could do it until I could build it up to their basic level. So I've been doing that for about 9 years, 9.5 years now. Um, so that to me has been a big change in my life. Um, but like I said, about the 5 year mark, with my wife said to me, "Look, how about you start coming to the gym with me?" Because she was still going to the gym, and that was pretty much the only time she got to herself because of my condition. Um, so I started going back to the gym, And that was when I decided, okay, I'm going to the gym. That was a big motivation for me to try and lose weight again, try and get leaner. And because I was still quite heavy, I was about 260 pounds at that stage. And I mean, for me, I'm very short, so that was quite big. And but it was really motivating. Actually, I started going for walks. It was great to be out, so it was great to be moving again. It felt after so many years in bed, um, literally not just basically I'd be sitting in a pool of sweat in this little bed and unable to move for so long. To be able to move again was like a freedom, you know. Um, but then to go to the gym or to even think about going to the gym, that was exciting. That was really exciting. And I had obviously I still couldn't do much. I was very weak, um, but just a little bit that I could do felt fantastic. And it was enough motivation for me to try and get leaner and try and drop some weight. And I was still having trouble. I still had that sort of low fat mentality. I wasn't cutting the fat off the meat at the time, but I wasn't adding extra fat. That was the only fat I was getting basically. And I was still suffering from colds and flus that would last months at a time. So I was kind of like doing two steps forward, one step back. You know, every time I caught a flu or cold, I would be out of the gym for months. So then that's when I started thinking, okay, there's got to be a way to heal my immune system. And I started asking these. Throughout the whole time, I've been asking my oncologist and I've been asking my GP, what can I do? You know, what can I do about this? And I got no answer. There was no reply. Basically, they had no idea. Um, and like my oncologist is a good guy. I don't want to say like I mean, he's trying to help people. Um, but when it came to this, there was take a pill. That was it. Like take some vitamins. Um, and I think this for me was there had to be a better answer. There had to be a better way. And even at this stage, I was still taking a lot of like vitamins and supplements. And I think knowing now, looking back, I think there are two underlying issues for my cancer. One was a low fat diet for far too long. It was basically my whole adult life. Basically, my whole life actually was a low fat diet. And two was heavily processed foods. So, like when I was growing up as a kid, there was a lot of, or it was a lot of just garbage food. But even in my adult life, you know, you swap the burgers and ice cream and that from the kid to protein powders and all these other different supplements and the fitness industry supplements that are just as processed, have just as much seed oils and poor sources of vitamins, minerals, and proteins. So I don't. Yeah, I can't believe looking back, I can't believe how much of that stuff I actually took in. But um, it's when I worked out how to get my lymphatic system right, is to increase my fat intake. I sort of just slowly, I was keto, but at the start I was kind of low fat keto. But then I
Mm-hmm.
realized what your lymphatic system thrives on is, fat soluble vitamins and nutrients that
Right.
you can only
Right.
get from fat. So And that sort of took a while to get my head around, because it was the whole dogma of low fat. Like,
That's right.
how is this possible? How can they be teaching this stuff? My college, my lecturers are always like, it's all about calories. I'm like, but look about now, it's like, if it's all about calories, I could eat ice cream all day as long as I didn't go over my calorie cap,
That's right.
you
That's
know?
right.
So what happened? Um, so that was when I started doing a lot of work on trying to figure out why, how it works, how my lymphatic system works, and of course how cholesterol works. That, when producing the hormones, that, I knew I needed D3, but I always figured I'd just take the supplement and I'll be right, but it wasn't until much later I realized, I found out that D3 it's a hormone produced from your cholesterol, from your liver. So, okay, so the more fat adapted I am, the more, so fasting will help and things like that. I produce more cholesterol, I can produce more D3, and I haven't had a cold or flu for ages. Actually, when I did sort of just gradually cut out more and more carbs. And then when I found the carnivore diet, actually my wife did. She was doing some research too. She's been helping me right along the whole
Mm.
way. Does a lot of research
I
as
should have
well.
been interviewing your wife, dude.
Yeah, I I try to get her online sometimes, because I think people would just love to meet her. But she's
That's
amazing.
right.
But
Nice.
she actually found someone in Japan doing the carnivore diet, and I was very low carb, but I was still having my fruit and vegetables, you know, and I still had rice meals every now and then. It's all clean carbs, or
Hmm.
as clean as carbs do get, which is not very clean these days. Um, but I wasn't eating a lot of other processed foods, um, and my first reaction was, that's BS. All right, okay. Look, athletes cut carbs all the time,
That's
and I'm
right.
thinking, like, they're on a lean meat diet, like just protein, you know, because I didn't know anything about it really, and I think that's just ridiculous. That's What an idiot. Um, Carnivore, just protein. You got to have more than protein. I'm thinking, dumbass. Like, and then she's like, about a month later, and she said, this guy, he's carnivore, he's doing this and that. And I said, okay, I'll have a look at it. And I found Sean Baker. And then I found all this research on, okay, diabetes, that they pretty much reversing type 2 diabetes on the carnivore diet.
That's right.
And it didn't make sense until they said, like, a high fat diet. Because
Hmm.
I was like, everyone I was seeing was like carnivore. They're saying, oh, you got to get protein.
That's
I'm like,
right.
that's ridiculous. You don't focus on the protein. You got to have the fat,
That's
you know.
right.
And then I'm thinking, okay, Sean Baker. Okay, now it makes sense. Okay, so
That's right.
carnivore is high fat diet.
That's right.
All
That's
right,
right.
so just fat and your protein. Now, okay, that I can understand. That's good.
That's right.
But you really don't need your veggies. I'm thinking, really?
It's a lot to swallow.
Yeah, it is. You think about a lifetime of the dogma, education, and propaganda, everything. They're trying to push us to a plant based diet, which most of us are on anyway. When you think about all the processed food that people eat, um, so it took it. I mean, it took me a good month, maybe 2 months, to think about actually diving straight into it.
Hmm.
But I was already very low carb anyway, so I didn't have to cut much out. That one thing I did have to get my head around, though, was um, increasing the amount of meat and fat.
Hmm.
Um, that took me probably another month of transition. I was kind of maybe under eating the first month or so. So
Sure.
I found myself sort of thinking maybe this isn't working very well because it's, I'm hungry and I'm not doing, I'm getting weak. But once I sort of just increased my fat intake and my overall portion sizes, then
Mm-hmm.
everything fell into place. Um, and at the
Yeah,
time, I had this was, let me see. So I'm now I'm 9.5 years in remission.
that's amazing.
Um, and throughout that time, the about 8 years was pretty much a keto, like just progressively getting lower and lower in carbs and losing medication. So I'm weaning myself off all these different medications. When I started, I had like two shopping bags full of
I
medications.
could imagine.
Right? It was it
How
was
many per day? How many medicines
I
per day were you
at the
taking?
peak I was on. I had 42 different pills, and
42.
a lot of them were to make up for side effects of like some of the other pills.
I
So
know.
I was on, yeah. So like they give me this heap of pills and they'd give me all these side effects, and then so I'd have to take these other pills to take care of the side effects,
Oh Lord,
you know.
crazy.
But before I went on to like a strict carnivore, so it took me about 7.5, 8 years. I had got down to just one medication for reflux for GERD. But since going carnivore, like just strict carnivore,
Mm-hmm.
um, I am zero medications and now zero supplements. Throughout that period, I was still in that fitness industry sort of supplement dogma as
Mm-hmm.
well. So while I was
Mm-hmm.
doing this keto stuff, I was still taking protein powders and still taking supplements, pills, and take your vitamins and all that sort of stuff. Um, but it wasn't until I found out about deuterium and the seed oils and things that I decided to cut all that out as well, and feel much better for it too. I mean, I don't take any supplements now, and that's I don't try and sell anyone any supplements. I don't try and push any or
That's right.
endorse any. If anything, I try to talk people out of them because if you can get them from your natural sources, just become fat adapted, eat a high fat diet.
Yeah,
Um, you'll get all the vitamins and
you get
nutrients that you need.
everything
So
you need.
yeah,
Yeah.
um, uh, it's like I said before, I think that was definitely the underlying issues to my diagnosis was the low fat diet for my whole life and the amount of processed foods, including the supplements. Because I was the supplement king at the time. I had all sorts of pre workout drinks, protein powders, vitamins, minerals, fish oil, even like your fish oil and D3 and magnesium, and these are good nutrients, but just bad sources. They're in the wrong portions. They're full of deuterium. They're full of seed oils and things like that too. So just
Yeah.
really bad sources of this these foods. So
Yeah. I just think that we have to keep messaging um, that we need essential amino acids, protein, essential fatty acids.
mm,
And who knew that the fatty acids, you know, help fuel the lymphatics and
yeah,
the lymphatic system. And we need our lymphatic system uh, for our immune system to function properly and our lymph nodes to function properly. So, but again, these are the things that are not regularly discussed in mainstream, and for people who need more omega, for example. Like I don't take a lot of supplements. I may do electrolytes because of maybe periodically I'll notice cramping. So I may do electrolytes. I use keto chow's salt with two T's,
Hmm.
and because I don't eat a lot of seafood,
Hmm.
but other than that, I eat fatty meat.
Hmm.
Uh, I mentioned before we started that we had guests from out of town, and we went to a restaurant in Chicago called the Franklin Room. Now I don't go out often because if I'm going to spend $60 or $70 for a steak, I can get about 5 or 6 of them and cook them
Yeah,
at
that's
home,
right.
and in
Right.
many cases make it taste better. But this was actually the Franklin Room in Chicago did a great job. And what's funny is that when we were at the restaurant, um, nobody really ordered the side veggies. What was interesting about that is that I remember when I used to go to restaurants, I hated a la carte, restaurants where you have to order the meat, then you got to order the sides, and it was separate. You're paying more money, it seemed, but now it's perfect because I don't need the sides, and they did a really wonderful job with this ribeye. So when you have the information, the biochemistry to, justify eating protein and fat, it frees you. And
Mm.
I hadn't even thought about the fact that I save money so much when I eat this way, when I'm focused on protein and fat. So it's been wonderful. And again, I was a vegetarian for 8 years. Part of that was vegan, and I just thought I was doing what was best based on a dogma. But now I know that that was not best. And my body rewards me every day because my belly feels happy because my irritable bowel seems to be gone. And emotionally, I'm in a much better place because I'm not on a roller coaster. So I'm curious for you, having this cancer diagnosis, I'm curious how it affects you emotionally because um, um, I guess even in terms of it being in remission, how often do you think about uh, cancer coming back? Is it much easier now that it's been 9 years? And is it easier now because you eat different? What's your thoughts on that emotionally?
Um, yeah, it's still like I still have blood tests every 6 months.
Hmm.
So, like for about a week before the blood test, I do a fair bit of preparation,
Hmm.
and it's always in the back of your mind,
Right,
like is it back? You know,
right,
um, but it is getting better. It's still. I'm at the point now where my wife and I are planning a future
right,
past our 6 month period.
right.
Like for the last 2 years, we've sort of been planning a bit more, and like before that, it was like we wouldn't even get a lease. Like for it, we're just renting an apartment here, but um, we would never get a lease past 6 months because just in case,
Just in
you know.
case.
And now we're planning more, sort of like a 5 year plan and a 10 year plan
Mm,
because I feel more confident now.
mm,
It's not just because I've been in remission now for 9.5 years, but because how much better I'm doing
right.
and feeling. I'm emotionally um, much more stable.
Yeah.
Um, when I was on, for the last 9.5 years, all my blood markers have been fairly stable but very low, and about 20 points below the bottom mark of a normal healthy range.
Hmm.
Um, but for the last year and a half, they've slowly kept creeping up and up and up, and I'm now all of my markers right across the board are in a normal healthy range.
Mm,
They're still quite low, but they are climbing, and they are still and still inside a normal healthy range.
That's right.
Um, so that to me has been a it's been like summiting a mountain, and it feels like I'm at the top, and I'm just going to keep on going, you know. So I think there's been a very big shift in.
Hmm.
Um, I mean, there's been a lot of emotion to go through the last 9 years, last 9.5 years. I mean, 12 years since I was diagnosed, 12 and a half almost. 9.5 years in remission. There was a lot of depression. There was a lot of um, emotions, like kind of like a roller coaster, just going up and down. Everything fluctuating. I couldn't think very well.
Was
Couldn't
any of
concentrate.
that before? Did you have any of these emotional issues, depression, anxiety prior to the diagnosis, or was this all a reflection of the diagnosis?
Um, I mean, throughout life, I mean, there's always been, sort of ups and downs. Everyone has ups
Hmm.
and downs. I'd say like before the diagnosis, there was quite a bit of stress, especially the year before,
Hmm.
with the earthquake. That was quite stressful. Um, but no more stress than I think like a normal life. Building a
Hmm.
business, building a home, that sort of stress. Um, Nothing like what I've been through the last 9.5 years.
Yeah.
Not or 12 years, I should say. Nothing like going through, losing everything, moving internationally, being diagnosed. That's a lot of stress.
Hmm.
Um, so that's kind of a funny thing for me too. I don't. A lot of people are worried about stress these days. Like they will literally stress about avoiding stress.
Right. I know.
You know,
That's true.
because I know like everyone's worried about stress. Okay, I don't want to produce cortisol. And I don't want to get fat and all this sort of stuff. But they're literally stressed about it,
That's
trying to
right.
avoid it. Um, so for me now, it's like sometimes when something happens, you have an immediate reaction. But I think it's best to give it, have a look at the situation, give it a bit of time, calm
Hmm.
down, and then like what you sometimes see up here is the problem is really only here,
That's right.
you know.
It's perception.
And a lot of this the stress that we suffer is really how we perceive it.
That's right.
Um, so I think you really have to try and put things into perspective.
That's right.
When I look back at what I've been through, sometimes it does get to me. I think, well, you know, I'm now 51, and I don't have my own home or my own business anymore.
Hmm.
I was trying to learn how to live again at 51, and that can get stressful, you know.
Yeah.
Um, but then I look back at everything and I think, well, who cares?
Hmm.
It doesn't matter. you know, like
Yeah.
everything else that I've been through. I don't care that my neighbor's got this, that, and the other thing. I
That's
don't care
right.
what other people
That's
have.
right.
It doesn't worry me.
And half the
Um,
time they're leasing the car and they're living
well, yeah,
check to
that's right.
check. So it's perception,
Yeah,
and we have to help people to see these things. And what you see on social media is it's all a show.
yeah.
It's like the politicians when they get in front of the mic and tell you their perspective. It's all a show. So,
Mm.
and I'm just curious, even as a doctor who's been charged and given the privilege of helping to help people, what would you want us to do better if you could rewrite the story? Anything about the journey you've had that would have been easier if the health system would have served you in a slightly different way?
Well, I think there's a number of things. Yeah, our system is very much like in America too. While going through treatment, well, when I was diagnosed, um, the the experts were all okay. It's got nothing to do with your food. There's nothing you could have done about it. It's a
That's
genetic
right.
thing. Okay, it's just your genetics.
That's right.
Everyone was jumping up and down saying, "Oh, it's because of Fukushima. It's because of this. It's because of the radiation." It had nothing to do with it. Um, but no one asked me what my diet was like,
Hmm. That's right.
and no one gave me a choice in, okay, this is how we could proceed, sort of thing. Like we could put you on a fasting keto style diet, and maybe some mild form of treatment. It was just, okay, this is our chop, this is what we're doing, and go. It was kind of like there was no time to. It's kind of like I kind of I think it's like when you go in to buy a used car, the first thing they want you to do is to sign the papers to buy it.
Right.
They don't want you to test drive it.
That's right.
Yeah, just come in, sign the papers, and give me the money. Okay, and
That's
I'll
right.
give you the
And
keys.
and focus on the
Um,
payment and not the interest rate.
yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So there's that. But I think they just don't know. Like I said,
Hmm.
it's all paint by numbers. They've got someone they've worked out. Okay, it's this disease. Okay, so it's this treatment, and for this many treatments.
That's
So
right.
it's
Just
just
that simple.
paint by numbers. Um, so
Mm.
it's and it was like that for the whole 3 years.
Hmm.
3 years of solid chemotherapy that I almost didn't survive a few times. About 4 or 5 times actually, it almost killed me.
Mm.
Um, so it was. I think it could have been avoided, um, but it also could have been avoided by myself as well. If it would be great if the so-called experts knew what they were doing, like knew more about nutrition. That would
That's
be
right.
wonderful. But I was ignorant to it as well, and like I was in the fitness industry, and I was fit. How did I get sick? Um,
That's right.
so it was. There's just a lot of changes that need to be made, and it's not just the medical system. It's the education
Oh,
system, and
it's everything.
it's
Even
everything.
I was just listening to um some in the United States, they're starting to re-educate our kids about like basic economics, right? What's compounding interest and how important it is to invest in your retirement. And they took that out. I think it goes back to back in the days when we were trying to, do well with space um, travel, and the fact that we were a little embarrassed that some of the other countries were doing better in math and science. So they started taking home economic stuff out, and they replaced it with math and science, which is important. But if people better know how to plan for their future, that would be very important too. So I think the focus of healthcare, just like with these economic issues, have to shift so that it's more balanced. And I think for all of us, we can't really wait for the system to change. You have to. That's why podcasts are important. That's why your YouTube channel is important, because um, DC learning to live will maybe help somebody else learn to live, help
That's the
somebody
thing. I
else
think
learn to
no one's an expert in life. We are all
nobody
just learning to live.
figuring it out.
We're
That's
all
it.
just figuring it out as we go.
That's
You know,
right.
and so it's and I like some people look. I mean, I'm not very good at making videos, for example, but I just started anyway because
Yeah.
it's just something you just learn as you
You
go.
just
And I
learn. Yeah,
think,
just got to do
yeah,
it. That's right.
school is like the beginning of your education. Afterwards, you learn along the way a lot more.
That's right. That's
Um,
right.
I mean, there is a lot of change that needs to happen. Like, for example, in my hospital, my oncologist actually had to um, get clearance for the medications he wanted to give me from an accountant. He
Mm.
literally had to call an accountant to make sure that he was allowed to give me a medication.
Okay.
All right, that's ridiculous. Um, they were feeding us. I mean, the medications that we were on, that I was on, were full of steroids, which drive blood sugar up and feed the cancer anyway.
Mm.
And of course, you got the chemotherapy as well, which doesn't do and it's not very effective either. But
Right.
um, then the dietary advice, like these people are healthcare professionals, so you trust them. They're all in white coats, That's what we've been indoctrinated to believe.
That's right.
They know
That's
everything,
right.
you know. But the dietary advice is while you're actually sitting there hooked up to the IV being treated, they're bringing around cakes, cookies, and soft drinks and every sugar. While I was in the hospital, because I didn't have a carer to take me home, I I couldn't eat the hospital food. It was like rubber. It's like eating a rubber chicken.
That's right.
And they said, "Well, there's a Burger King next door. Just go grab a burger."
That's
That
right.
was the dietary advice. And they literally said to me, "Junk food is healthier for you when you're going through treatment because
Hmm.
it doesn't have any nutrients to feed the cancer."
Right. Right.
I'm like,
I know
even I knew that was wrong.
that's insanity at the
Yeah,
extreme.
exactly.
It
That
doesn't make
is
sense.
that unbelievable.
Yeah.
And these are the experts that are telling me that there's nothing you can do about it. So eat whatever you want. You know?
Well, that's completely untrue. Which is,
Yeah.
and you mentioned um, as we were getting ready to record, you had watched the episode with Dr. Paul Merrick who talked about
Yeah, that was
cancer,
great.
and so we'll have a link to that episode along with your YouTube channel, because that episode gave people hope. There is something you can do besides chemo and radiation, um, and more meds. And so, if there is something that's evidence based, let's do those things. And it's surprising when one of those things is intermittent fasting. And for those who don't follow us regularly, it's surprising when it's a keto or carnivore diet. And so I just really appreciate um, everything you've shared on part one and part two. Is there anything, before I ask you how you're going to protect your nest, anything else you would have wanted me to have asked you during this interview?
No, I think that covers pretty much everything.
Yeah.
Um, like you said, that interview you did with Dr. Marek, it does show there are choices, and I hope that people can see that in my story too, because I was stage 4 twice in 2 years,
Mm,
and I've managed to keep it in remission now for 9.5 years. Okay,
yes.
almost 10 years, purely from diet.
Right.
Zero medications. My my blood markers are all inside a normal, healthy range, and if you check out my channel, like I hit the gym pretty hard now. I'm pretty fit,
Ladies and
and
gentlemen, let me say this. He hit the gym. That first episode, I saw you hitting the gym. And after I overcame my jealousy, I was like, this is what you want to see. This is what living, this is how you learn to live, because you show in that video, that first video, which I'll share, what I just can't imagine a guy that couldn't even hold a freaking mug being able to do the things you're able to do. It's pretty impressive.
oh, thank you. Yeah,
Yeah.
it takes time, and I think people it can be frustrating. It's not just having a low carb, high fat diet that's going to it also requires time. You think
Yeah.
about a lifetime of abuse that your body has taken through either ignorance, poor diet education, or just the way that we've been brought up to eat, um, it's still going to take some time. It might take years, but
Mm-hmm.
those years of healing are very, very short and quick in comparison. Like, I feel great now. Like, even this last 9.5 years, at the time it feels like it's slow, but when you look
Yes.
back at the time that you've spent and how far you've come, it's an incredibly short period, really.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
so
And
don't be just take it one day at a time.
one day
Don't
at a time.
try and, I mean, nobody's, when you see, especially um, when you have a big obstacle in front of you, sometimes
Mm-hmm.
it can look like a mountain. But no
That's
one
right.
says you have to take it in one leap.
Nope.
Just take it one step at a time, and every inch you get closer, you move forward. You're getting closer to the top.
Yeah, I
So
agree.
it,
I agree 100%. And listen, man, that's been very helpful for me. No matter what I'm trying to achieve, being a better husband, being a better doctor, a better leader, a better father. Um, my wife sometimes asks me, "Why don't you stress about things like others?" And part of it is I kind of compartmentalize what's in front of me. So I'll say, okay, for example, if I had to do I had to speak on behalf of an organization that I'm part of that deals with providing um, educational information to patients via an app, but it also includes nutrition, access to, you know, uh, fresh foods, etc., and trying to convince the state I live in to provide that to people with less resources, which is the Medicaid program. But in order to prepare for this little testimonial, right, um, I compartmentalize it and I say, okay, let me just focus on this testimonial. I don't worry about, the 10 other things on the to-do list, right? And I think another concept people would learn from is the Eisenhower matrix, which is if people search that, it just allows you to focus on what's urgent and important first, and things that are not urgent and not important last. And what happens is it's magical in that if you do urgent important things first, then if you never get to the not urgent, not important things, it doesn't matter. It won't stress you out. But
yeah,
if you did your taxes, for example, in America, we got April 15th was the deadline, right? If you did your taxes, it's not going to matter that you didn't go to the mall to buy those shoes that you wanted.
yeah,
It just won't matter. So I think that's advice for anybody. If you haven't heard of the Eisenhower matrix, use that as a guide to make decisions and to focus on things that are important first. So the last thing that's important for this podcast, other than us reminding them about your great YouTube channel, is how you plan to protect your nest. And when you think about the things that we talk about, nutrition, exercise, less sleep, etc., where are you focusing your attention over the next 12 months?
um, yeah. My main focus is always health, and trying to get that message out.
Yeah.
So I am. I'll be putting my story into a book,
Nice.
and that will be, because to me, what's going on around the world, the way we can win, the way we fight back, is to get healthy, to stay healthy, and to become independent. I mean, independent from pharmaceuticals, and live in that as natural as possible. Um, that, I think, is a big message for everyone. I think everyone wants. I think most people, 9 out of 10 people, want to be healthy.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Right.
they just don't know how. and it
That's right.
seems complicated. So hopefully people can see see what I've done, and
Mm-hmm.
realize, like, if I can do it, absolutely anyone can.
Nice.
Um, so it I know it feels difficult at times, and it is a struggle. Um, but oh, there you go.
Oh yeah,
Just
while
change
you're getting,
camera.
oh yeah, don't worry. While you're getting that together, it's so funny. I was kind of thinking about, um, we're brothers wearing the same colored shirt, and the timing of the video fading away is probably timely because we're at the point where we're wrapping up this episode anyway. So if you can't get that back, my friend, don't worry. It couldn't have been better time. So I hear you. And this is life, man. When we struggle, we don't make a big deal out of it. So, man, I'm
No,
so calm these days. So I really appreciate you, man. And I'm gonna make sure to share the YouTube channel, DC Learning to Live, because I think people need to know you exist, and and I'll give a couple of closing comments, but I just want to thank you again for the opportunity to spend not just 1 hour with me, but 2 hours, and a part one and a part two, which I don't do often, but I really felt your story was compelling, and we needed to have time to hear it and to learn from your ability to overcome and be resilient. So thank you, DC, again for being a guest on the podcast.
no, thanks very much for having me. Yeah, I look forward to talking to you again. So
And we will. And
really
just
appreciate it.
I appreciate you. And guys, just so you know, DC has invited me to be on his channel. So we'll make sure to share that. I'll share that on my YouTube channel once we get that out as well. And but thanks again, DC, for being here, and for all those who came to this episode, because sometimes life can hit you like a tsunami, and when it hits you, just like his video going out, it hits you, and it makes you feel like you're losing hope. And but like DC, when that happens, if you just hang in there, you will have the opportunity to rise up and chart a path of healing, a path to emotional and physical recovery, a path that may land you in a better place than you started. And again, when you check out DC and the exercise he's doing, you'll see he's landed in a pretty good place. So before you heard DC's story, you were probably feeling a little despair. But now you have an opportunity to remove those self limiting thoughts and replace them with hope. So, my hope is that today's episode will be the first step towards recovery. And, and with hope restored, you will be one step closer to becoming metabolically healthy. So, for those who checked us out today and made it to this part of the podcast, I appreciate you and thank you for coming to this episode of the Protecting Your Nest podcast. And until we meet again, continue to be safe, be well, and continue to protect your nest.